It was an ordinary evening, until it wasn't. The air was thick with humidity, the kind that clung to your skin and made everything feel slower. A bus screeched around the corner, brakes hissing, tires spitting gravel. Ava stood alone at the edge of the sidewalk, clutching a folder to her chest, eyes scanning the distance. Suddenly, a man's voice cut through the noise. "Hey baby, where you headed?" he slurred. Ava ignored him, but he stepped closer. "Don't walk away from me," he shouted. A passing couple turned their heads. Ava froze. The man grabbed her wrist. Then, it happened. Ava let out a sharp scream, loud, guttural, primal. Everyone nearby stopped. The man, startled, loosened his grip. Ava's voice didn't quiver. Instead, it grew fiercer. "You don't get to touch me," she shouted. A small crowd began to form. Someone pulled out a phone. Another woman stepped forward. The harasser backed off slowly, muttering curses. Ava stood still, breathing heavily, shaking, but not from fear. From fury. From something long buried being unearthed. Later that evening, Ava sat on the edge of her bed, the city sounds muffled behind her window. Her hand still bore the faint redness from where she was grabbed, but it wasn't the physical contact that lingered, it was the rage. Not just at him, but at everything that had built up for years. She whispered to herself, that scream wasn't just for him. She reached for the leather journal on her nightstand. Inside were pages of unanswered questions, family secrets, and fragmented memories of a father she barely remembered. A torn photo was tucked in the back, a young man in a military uniform beside a woman with tired eyes. Ava traced their faces, her brow furrowing. Something in today's confrontation had triggered this buried need for truth. She hadn't looked in this journal in years. But tonight she did. And something had shifted. The next morning, Ava walked through the school gates, trying to wear her usual calm demeanor like a mask. As a high school counselor, she was the one students turned to in times of confusion and chaos, but inside, she felt no clarity. "Miss Shah, do you have a minute?" a shy student asked. Ava smiled gently, nodding. As they spoke, Ava's thoughts drifted. This city, this job, this identity, it had all been a safe facade. But what if the truth beneath was something else entirely? She walked past the staff bulletin board where a black and white article headline caught her eye, "Retired Army Colonel Tied to Political Cover-Up." She froze. Her eyes locked on the grainy photo below the headline. Her breath hitched. The face, it looked too familiar. In the quiet of the teacher's lounge, Ava stared at the article in her hands. The paper was weeks old, but she'd never noticed it before. The man in the photo was listed as Colonel Samir Qureshi, retired, accused of burying a military corruption scandal in the late 90s. Ava muttered, "Qureshi, that's Mom's maiden name." Her hands trembled. She checked the byline. The journalist was local. A possibility took root, a terrifying one. Could this man be her father? The man she was told died when she was 3? She closed the door, placed the article on the table, and pulled out her phone. Her thumb hovered over the search bar. With one tap, she could start unraveling a life carefully constructed on lies. That night, Ava couldn't sleep. She paced the living room, replaying the scream at the bus stop, the article, the name. Her mother had always dodged questions about the past. "It's better you don't know," she used to say. But Ava couldn't unsee the resemblance. She grabbed a shoebox from the closet, the one with old photos and certificates. Inside, between forgotten trinkets, she found another clue, a postcard from Lahore, dated 1995. The handwriting was elegant but strange. "For Ava, when you're old enough to read this, ask your mother why I had to leave." No name. Just that message. Ava sat on the floor, staring at it, her heart pounding. "Why did you leave?" she whispered into the dark. The next morning, Ava visited her mother's house, an aging structure tucked between 2 construction sites. The knock on the door was firm, rehearsed. Her mother, Farah, opened it slowly, surprised. "You're early," she said cautiously. Ava stepped in without responding. The living room smelled of jasmine and old fabric. Ava pulled the postcard from her bag and placed it on the coffee table. Farah's face went pale. "Where did you find this?" she asked. Ava's voice was low but sharp. "Why did he leave? You always told me he died." Farah didn't speak. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the card. "Because if you knew the truth, they'd never let you live in peace," she finally said. Ava stared at her mother, eyes narrowing. "Who are they?" A long silence hung in the air before Farah whispered, "People who don't forgive mistakes, especially when the truth threatens power." Farah finally spoke. "His name was Samir Qureshi. Your father. He was a decorated officer. But then he got involved in something bigger than all of us." Ava sat still, absorbing each word. "He started speaking out about corruption in the ranks," Farah continued. "And when he wouldn't stay silent, they made him disappear. Not kill him, just erase him." Ava blinked, stunned. "You mean he's alive?" Farah sighed. "Last I heard, yes. Somewhere in the south. He sent that postcard through a friend." Ava stood up, the chair scraping the tile. "You let me believe he was dead." Farah didn't argue. "I had to protect you, Ava. We both would have been targets." Ava turned toward the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. "I'm done being protected. I need to know who I am." Back in her apartment, Ava couldn't shake the words from her mind. She sat at her desk, pulling out old school records, certificates, even medical documents. Every detail of her identity felt suddenly fragile. Her birth certificate listed no father. Her school emergency forms said, deceased. A hollow paper trail. Ava typed Colonel Samir Qureshi into her search bar. Dozens of results popped up, some recent, some buried in archives. Headlines read, "Whistleblower or traitor?" and "Military insider vanishes after leaking documents." Ava clicked deeper. One article listed a journalist named Lena Zaman as his last known contact. Ava whispered, "Lena, I know that name." Her eyes widened. Lena wasn't just a journalist. She was Ava's godmother, and her mother's oldest friend. Ava didn't wait. She drove to Lena's apartment on the other side of town. What? It was late. The city glowing under a blanket of sodium lights. Lena opened the door in her robe, startled. "Ava," she said, voice unsure. Ava held up her phone with the article on display. "You knew," she said, stepping in. "You knew about my father. You wrote about him." Lena looked tired, caught. "Your mother made me promise," she whispered. Ava's voice cracked. "You were at my graduation. You held me when I was sick, and you kept this from me?" Lena nodded slowly. "Because I knew if you started asking questions you wouldn't stop, and some truths are dangerous." Ava's voice hardened. "I'm not afraid of danger. I'm afraid of never knowing the truth." Lena finally let Ava in. They sat in silence for a moment, before Lena reached into an old wooden box and handed Ava a sealed envelope. "He gave this to me 20 years ago," she said. "Told me to give it to you when you were ready. I didn't think that would be today." Ava stared at the envelope. Her name was written on the front in a hand she didn't recognize but felt oddly familiar. She held it gently, the weight of years thick in her grip. "Is he still alive?" she asked. Lena's lips tightened. "Last I heard he was living under a different name, somewhere in the mountains, off the grid. But if you open that, you'll know where to start." Ava placed the envelope on her lap, her hands trembling. "Then, this is it," she said quietly. "The beginning." Ava sat at her kitchen table long past midnight, staring at the unopened envelope. Her thumb hovered over the seal. With one breath she broke it. Inside were 3 items: a letter, a faded map with red markings, and an old photograph. The letter was handwritten. "My dearest Ava, if you're reading this, you've already begun walking into dangerous territory. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I had to disappear. To protect you and your mother. I spoke out when I shouldn't have. They called me a traitor. But I was only trying to stop a machine built on silence and blood. The truth is in the files they buried in the Kaiser Valley. If you want answers, go there. But know this, knowing everything might. Ava's fingers trembled. Kaiser Valley. She whispered the name aloud, feeling its unfamiliar weight. It wasn't just about her father anymore. It was about a legacy she didn't choose, but now had to face. The next day, Ava called in sick and drove out of the city toward a rural town bordering the Kaiser Valley. The road narrowed as the buildings disappeared behind her. Her phone signal dropped to zero. She passed abandoned checkpoints, rusting signage, and hollow-eyed villagers. At a gas station, she asked an old man, "Do you know where this is?" She showed him the map. "Die." He squinted, then looked around nervously. "People who go up there, they don't come back." Ava stared at him. "I'm not people," she replied. He simply nodded, muttering something in Pashto under his breath. Ava got back in her car and continued, the weight of his words pressing against her chest. The trees grew denser, the air colder. Something about this place felt stuck in time, as if her father's past was still lingering in its shadows. Ava arrived at an old military outpost, half buried in weeds and silence. The gate was broken, its sign faded. No entry. Government property. She stepped inside, clutching the map. It led her to a concrete bunker partially hidden under ivy. Her boots echoed as she entered. Dust filled the air like ghosts. She found an old metal cabinet, its lock rusted through. Inside were folders, yellowed, brittle, marked with red ink. Project Kaiser Tote. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She flipped through pages detailing covert operations, forced disappearances, bribed officials. Her father's name appeared again and again, marked dissenting personnel. Then, photos. Men lined up, blindfolded. A signature, Samir Qureshi. Her father didn't just expose the system. He tried to stop executions. And they buried him for it. Just as Ava pocketed a few documents, she heard the crunch of gravel outside. Her breath caught. She quickly doused her light and pressed herself against the wall. A shadow passed the doorway. Two men in plain clothes entered, flashlight scanning. One spoke into a radio. "We've got movement. She's here." Ava's mind raced. They knew. She ducked behind a collapsed filing cabinet as boots thudded closer. Her pulse was deafening. She clutched the file tighter and looked toward a crawlspace behind a collapsed wall. Without hesitating, she dove through it, scraping her hands and knees. The darkness swallowed her, but she didn't stop. Every part of her screamed to run, but her father's letter echoed in her head. Knowing everything might cost you everything. Ava emerged from the hidden crawlspace into the forest beyond, her clothes torn and covered in dirt. She stumbled forward, gasping for breath. Behind her, voices yelled, but she kept moving. She found a narrow footpath leading down toward a stream. She followed it, not knowing where it led, only that it led away. Finally, after an hour of running and slipping, she reached an abandoned shepherd's hut. She collapsed inside, slamming the door shut and bracing it with a wooden beam. Then, she pulled out the file she had stolen. Her hands trembled as she flipped to the final page. A list of names. One was underlined. Her father's. Another name, unfamiliar, was circled in red. Politician. A man still in office. Ava's eyes sharpened. "So you're still alive," she whispered. "And you're going to pay." Ava returned to the city under the cover of dawn. Her body ached, her mind sharper than ever. The name circled in red haunted her. Minister Harun Zia, a man revered by the public as a clean politician. Ava sat at a cafe with Lena, laying the stolen documents between them. Lena scanned them, her expression hardening. "This is proof," she whispered. "Direct links, cover-ups, murders, threats, and Harun signed off on all of it." Ava nodded. "I'm going public." Lena looked up sharply. "Do you know what they'll do to you?" Ava stared back. "Yes, but if I don't speak, I become them. I won't inherit silence." Lena leaned forward, voice low. "Then we do it right. I still have connections in the press. But you need to prepare. This won't end with a headline. It'll be war. That afternoon, Ava walked into her apartment to find the door slightly ajar. Her pulse quickened. She stepped inside slowly. Nothing seemed disturbed, until she saw the envelope on her kitchen table. No postage, no markings. Just her name. Inside was a single sheet. Stop digging or you won't like what you find. Toiler dig what you find. Ava's blood ran cold. She looked around, no sign of forced entry. They'd been inside. Watching. Watch. She called Lena, voice shaking. They've found me. Lena responded without pause. Then we move faster. Ava didn't sleep that night. She changed all her locks, backed up every file, and sent a sealed copy of the documents to a trusted lawyer. Fear clawed at her, but beneath it, something stronger had taken root: conviction. The next day, Ava met with a journalist Lena trusted. Rehan, a sharp, no-nonsense reporter in his early 40s. They met in a quiet bookshop cafe, surrounded by walls of dusty titles. Ava handed him the folder. You verify it, and you publish it, she said. Rehan flipped through the pages, his brow rising with each turn. This could bring down half the ministry, he muttered. Ava leaned in. Then, bring them down. Every last one of them. Rehan looked up. Once this goes out, there's no putting it back. You'll need protection. Maybe exile. Ava smiled grimly. I need justice. If I'm exiled for that, so be it. Rehan nodded slowly, slipping the documents into his bag. Then let's make history. News broke within 48 hours. Whistleblower exposes minister's hidden crimes. It hit every major platform, faster than Ava imagined. Videos of Ava reading statements, scans of original documents, and testimonies from former soldiers flooded feeds. Harun Zia's team denied everything. Ava, however, was no longer hiding. She stood on the courthouse steps, facing cameras. My name is Ava Shah. My father was silenced because he tried to protect the truth. I will not be silenced. Not now. Flashbulbs erupted. Inside, legal teams scrambled, but outside, Ava had become a symbol. Unexpected, unbreakable. Lena stood beside her, proud and protective. Ava whispered, "This isn't the end." Lena responded, "No, but it's the first real beginning." That evening, Harun Zia appeared on national television, denying all allegations. But the evidence had already taken root. Protests erupted. Veterans spoke out. International agencies called for an inquiry. Ava watched from her balcony, wrapped in a shawl, as chants echoed through the streets below. Lena joined her with tea. It's bigger than we thought, she said. Ava nodded, her eyes tired but burning with purpose. Then we fight bigger. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. We see you. You're not done yet. Ava didn't flinch. Good, she said. Neither are we. Farah called minutes later. Her voice was soft. Your father would be proud. Ava closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt the ground beneath her was finally real. The backlash came swiftly. Ava's workplace received anonymous threats. Her students were pulled from counseling sessions. News anchors debated her credibility, framing her as unstable and emotionally compromised. Still, she didn't bend. She stood in front of the school board, clutching a resignation letter. This place deserves someone not at war, she said. Her voice cracked slightly. But I won't apologize for seeking the truth. Some teachers wept. One stood and clapped. Then another. Ava walked out, her steps slow but deliberate. Outside, Lena waited. You don't have to do this alone, she said. Ava shook her head. I know, but it started with me. And it ends with me making sure he can't hide anymore. They walked toward the street as sirens blared in the distance. Later that night, Ava reviewed a hidden email Lena had unearthed, an old exchange between Harun Zia and a private security firm. It detailed orders to suppress internal dissent during military transitions. One line jumped out: deal with Quresh's daughter if she resurfaces. Ava sat back, stunned. They planned this for years. She forwarded the document to Rehan with one word: confirm. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, then she typed again: I want to meet him, I want to meet Harun. Rehan called almost instantly. Ava, that's not a smart move. She replied, he knows I'm alive, he knows I'm watching. I want him to see that I'm not afraid. There was silence, then Rehan said, I'll make a call. Ava stared at her screen. The line had been crossed. This wasn't journalism anymore. It was war. Ava arrived at the private club in the city's diplomatic quarter, her steps steady. She was led into a dark paneled meeting room. There, at the head of the table, sat Harun Zia, older than his public image, his eyes sharp and calculating. Shah, he said, almost amused. You're braver than your father. Ava didn't sit. You had him erased. You tried to erase me. Harun leaned back. He made enemies. He endangered the peace we built. Ava snapped. Peace built on secrets and graves. He chuckled. You think exposing me will save anyone? They'll replace me in a week. Ava leaned forward. Then I'll expose them too. Silence followed. A shift in his eyes, surprise, maybe respect, or fear. You've started something you can't control, he warned. Ava replied, neither could you. As Ava left the building, she felt something shift. Harun hadn't denied anything. In fact, he'd practically confessed. Rehan met her outside. He knows it's over, Ava said. Rehan nodded. But he'll drag others down with him. The real test starts now. That night, Ava prepared her final move. A live broadcast, unedited, streaming her father's letter, her findings, and the files. If I disappear, she said to camera, know that the truth was worth every breath. She uploaded everything to a secure cloud, triggering auto-release if her signal went silent for 48 hours. Lena watched from across the room. You've turned the sword around, Ava, she whispered. Ava replied, no, I'm just refusing to die quietly. The next morning, Ava's broadcast had reached over 1 million views. Hashtag spread like wildfire. International news picked it up. Parliament was forced into emergency session. Harun resigned within hours. But the victory was not clean. Ava's apartment had been broken into again, this time, everything ransacked. Files gone. But it didn't matter. The truth was out. Ava stood amid the debris, phone in hand, reading headlines aloud. Daughter of dissident sparks government collapse. She smiled faintly, cut her finger on a broken frame and whispered, it's done. Lena entered behind her. You okay? Ava looked around at the wreckage. Not yet. But for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid. And she meant it. In the days following Harun Zia's resignation, the country felt like it was holding its breath. Protests turned into candlelight vigils. People gathered outside government buildings, chanting Ava's name. But inside her apartment, Ava moved cautiously. Her lawyer confirmed an official inquiry was underway. Ava's testimony had been requested, under protection. They want me to come in quietly, she told Lena. No media, no cameras. Lena frowned. They want to control the narrative. Ava nodded. Then we'll bring our own. She contacted Rehan, who agreed to document the entire process, on record. They silenced my father behind closed doors, Ava said. I want to give them that chance with me. That night, Ava began preparing her statement. Her voice might tremble, but the words wouldn't. On the morning of her testimony, Ava stepped into the protection van flanked by 2 quiet security officers. Outside, cameras flashed through tinted glass. Inside the courthouse, journalists were barred, but Rehan had already set up hidden audio and visuals. This is for history, he'd said. Ava walked into the hearing room, where a half-circle of officials sat, cold and unreadable. "Please state your name," the lead officer said. "Ava Shah," she replied. "Daughter of Samir Qureshi." Murmurs echoed. She began her account, everything from the postcard to the files, to Haroon's veiled threats. Her voice wavered at moments but never broke. When she finished, there was silence. Then one official muttered, "Well, deliberate." Ava stood, unshaken. "You won't bury this one." After the hearing, Ava stepped out into a muted city. The street was quiet, but a few people clapped as she descended the courthouse steps. A young girl held a hand-drawn sign. "You gave us a voice." Ava's heart clenched. She crouched and hugged the girl gently. Behind her, Lena and Rehan stood like sentinels. Ava turned to them. "It's not just about my father anymore. It's about all the ones who never got to speak." Rehan replied, "And you spoke for them." Reporters finally broke through the barrier. Flashes lit up again. This time, Ava didn't flinch. She raised her head. "We don't need heroes," she said into the mics. "We need truth. And the courage to chase it." 1,000 voices erupted behind her. That evening, Ava visited her father's old neighborhood, a decaying street where whispers still clung to the walls. She walked slowly past shuttered shops and dusty windows. An old man recognized her. "You're Qureshi's girl," he said with reverence. Ava nodded. He was never forgotten here. The man smiled sadly. He walked with fire in his chest. Ava looked around. "So do I." She reached a small, overgrown graveyard nearby. A plaque bore her father's name, not officially sanctioned, just hand-carved. She knelt before it, placing the original letter beside it. "I did what you couldn't," she whispered. "But I had to lose everything to get here." The wind picked up, rustling trees around her. Ava stood slowly, eyes glistening. "You live in me now." Back at her apartment, Ava began packing. Not to flee, but to reset. She folded away years of routine, placing books, letters, and memories into boxes. On the wall, she left one thing: a framed print of her father's old military photo, now surrounded by newspaper clippings of the exposé. Lena entered with 2 mugs of tea. "Where will you go?" Ava smiled faintly. "Somewhere quiet. Right, teach again maybe, but on my own terms." Lena handed her the cup. "And if they come back for you?" Ava shrugged. "Let them, I'm not hiding anymore." Outside, the city pulsed with a new kind of energy, one Ava had helped spark. She didn't defeat the system, not entirely, but she cracked it wide enough for light to get in. A week later, Ava boarded a quiet train heading south. No press, no cameras, just her, and a worn leather satchel. The hum of the tracks beneath her felt grounding. She stared out the window, watching the city fade into green fields and distant hills. In her lap sat a new journal, the first page blank, untouched. A conductor passed by. "Long journey ahead?" he asked kindly. Ava smiled. "The important kind." He nodded and moved on. She opened the journal and wrote the first words. "This is not the end. It never was." With every passing mile, she let go of what had been taken, and what she had reclaimed. Not vengeance. Not even justice. Something deeper. Truth earned. She closed the journal gently and watched the horizon open before her. Ava arrived in a coastal village, small and sun-drenched, nestled between rolling hills and ocean cliffs. She rented a modest cottage with peeling white paint and wildflowers growing along the fence. Locals gave her space, but smiles were offered. She spent her days walking the shore, collecting rocks and letting her mind finally breathe. One afternoon, she found a community center offering evening literacy classes. She walked in, introduced herself and said simply, "I'd like to teach." The coordinator looked surprised, but welcomed her. That night, Ava stood in front of a chalkboard again, watching children and elders alike jot down letters and stories. It wasn't the life she had planned. But maybe it was the life that chose her. At the community center, Ava's students asked questions that made her smile. "Why do we write?" a small boy asked. Ava knelt beside him. "So no one else can steal our story." She guided them through exercises, how to form thoughts, speak clearly, and most of all, to believe their words mattered. In the quiet after class, she stayed back, organizing books. One child had left a note. "Miss Ava, I want to be brave like you." Ava held it to her chest. It wasn't fame she'd found, nor safety. It was impact. The kind that can't be measured in headlines. That night, she stood at the water's edge under a blanket of stars, her breath finally steady, her heart lighter. She whispered, "This is enough." Weeks passed. The world moved on. News cycles shifted. But in certain circles, academic, activist, military reform, Ava's name remained a symbol. Her file had triggered investigations far beyond what she imagined. Whistleblowers stepped forward. Survivors found courage. Even in silence, Ava's story spoke. One morning, Lena visited the village. They sat on a bench overlooking the sea. Lena held up a letter. "They're creating a national archive. They want your father's letter in it." Ava took a breath. "He'd like that." Lena smiled. "And they want you to speak at the unveiling." Ava looked out at the ocean. "I think I'll write a statement, but let others carry the torch now." Lena nodded. "That's still leading." Ava closed her eyes. "Maybe that's peace." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ava walked alone down the path from the cliffs. A soft breeze carried the scent of salt and jasmine. Her hair danced around her face. She thought of her father, not as a fallen hero, but as a man who had tried. A man who had passed his fire to her. She reached the edge of the beach, kicked off her shoes, and let the waves touch her feet. The same ocean that once seemed endless now felt like home. She whispered a final line from her journal. "The world tried to silence me. Instead, I found my voice." She turned back toward the cottage, the last rays of sun catching her silhouette. Ava wasn't walking away from the storm. She had already passed through it, and survived.